All right, David,
Wow.
Jack, take it away.
Okay. I have to agree to be recorded. Yeah, sure. Well, Alina, you've probably heard a lot of this. you could you could give this talk, but I also don't want this really to just be like a talk or a lecture. I That's not my style. My style is to do kind of a dialogue as we go along. And I know you've been reading plays up to this point. Is that right? Mostly reading and doing looking at different plays, but then reading all of them or parts of them. So you may have even done this before, or I'm going to focus on two plays that I think kind of encapsulate what I want to talk about or what I want to, kind of identify as what I think are key elements of Jewish theater, Jewish performance, what it means to be a Jew, and put yourself out there in terms of a expression that comes from ourselves as our personal identities, our collective identities, our historical identities, and our heritage that we pass down, but then how it transforms. As I'm sure all of you know, culture is not relevant and it's not meaningful unless it has something that is dynamic to it. If it stays the same, if we just do the same old shtick, so to speak, then people are not either going to resonate to it, but we ourselves are going to become kind of frozen in the ways that it's done. At the same time, going back and looking at historical pieces, at pieces that explore our own heritage that go back. I mean, it's just amazing to me looking at what's going on in Ukraine right now. And then, you know, doing a good look at the history of Jews in Ukraine. I don't know if anybody has done that, but it's an over 1,000-year history. And not only are we the beneficiaries of that history, but we are continuing to see how being Jewish is so much a part of what's going on in this conflict. It's integral to how Putin is dealing with Ukraine, and it's integral with how Zelensky is dealing with Putin, and how they see themselves as part of Ukraine. And yes, there's a very mixed history around this, and we'll get to some of this actually in one of the pieces I'm going to show. It's a history. I mean, some of you may have even come or had family members who came from Ukraine. I do. My grandmother came from a town that we're going to see a play that took place in Mirapol. And the play is a play that I'm sure all of you have, not even know about, but have even done, the Dybbuk. I want to show that because I think that's the ur drama of Jewish theater. And when we look at the elements of what creates Jewish plays and a connection to who we are and then how we express ourselves, I think we can see that in the Dybbuk. But just to say a little bit more about Ukraine and the elements of that in our past, I mean, I'm sure all of you know about the play Indecent. Well, Shalom Ash was very connected to the Jewish artists that were in Odessa. He was there at a conference and presenting what it meant to retain Jewish culture and Jewish identity and Jewish theater all together. This is what the purpose originally of the play, The Dybbuk, was about. It was actually S. Ansky, Shlomo Rappaport Ansky, did this ethnographic research to know what Jewish life was like in Ukraine and collected all sorts of memorabilia, songs, nigunim, Hasidic nigunim, stories. And that, to some extent, is what the Dybbuk is. It's the stories and the lives of the people from Ukraine. But those stories and lives go all the way back. They're not just, something that, oh, this is Fiddler on the Roof time and it's fun and we have a lot of happy, clappy Jews. This is about a group of people or a whole cultural heritage that continue to be passed down. And when I went to Poland, for instance, a few years ago, and some of you may have been to Poland and have seen, not only the devastation of Jews in Poland, 90% of the Jewish population was wiped out in the Holocaust, but also I hope you noticed the incredible culture that was there, the Jewish culture that was there, the Yiddish theaters that were there. We went to, and I hadn't really realized it at the time, but I really wanted to go to a small town called Wrocław. Has anyone been to Wrocław? See, I thought so. Although it had been a German town at one time, it was called Breslau. Has anyone heard of Breslau? Seeing some heads nod. Great. So that's the version that you know of. The center of that town was the generator for Jewish life that we're living today in the United States. It was the beginning of what later becomes conservative Judaism, the Wissenschaft des Judentums, if I use some German now, I hope you don't mind. And that's about the extent of my German, by the way. But the scientific Judaism was there, based in Breslau, in Wrocław. Reform Judaism started in Breslau. The Abraham Geiger was there, who started this more reformed way of being Jewish. And also Yiddish theater was there and was right there next to a synagogue that was destroyed. And I saw that there. And the arts and culture that was there was immense. And what else is in Wrocław, which was the original reason why I wanted to go there? The Grotowski Theater Institute, the Grotowski Laboratory, that created one of the first Holocaust plays in the world, Acropolis. And we went and we did a whole day workshop on how they did that, and the Grotowski plastiques and all that. Some of you may have had Grotowski in training. I did some when I was in college, and then had a few people that I worked with outside of college as well. So this ongoing heritage is something we need to get back to, and then also see how we can jump off of it. And that's really what I want to do today, is kind of show this heritage with the ways that being Jewish is integral to the dramatic expressions, to the theater. And I don't know whether you got into this when you did the Dybbuk, or what impressed you most about doing the Dybbuk. I think you did it as a reading already. Is that right? That's so, right. And had any of you ever seen the Dybbuk before? Okay. So the Dybbuk has an interesting history. It is known as being one of the most influential Yiddish pieces of Yiddish theater. And as I mentioned, Ansky did it as part of an ethnographic expedition that collected thousands of pieces of memorabilia, stories, songs, etc. But it also came out of a theater project, a theater laboratory. I'm sure all of you have heard of that theater laboratory, the Moscow Art Theater. And that's where Habima Theater started. And this was in the early 1900s. Stanislavski was there. His mentor director, Vakhtangov, was there. And Vakhtangov took on the project of directing the Dybbuk, done in Hebrew. And then it was done in Yiddish in Poland at about the same time. And Ansky kind of bopped back and forth between the two productions. And he never saw a full production, a production fully produced. He died before that. It's a Jonathan Larson story, right? But sad, very sad. He never saw it fully produced. But we have, in a kind of, well, it's not a silent movie, but it's in Yiddish. We have the 1938 film version of the Dybbuk. Has anyone seen that? It's in Yiddish. It's Michael Wojcinski directed it, and it has most of the original actors from the Polish theater company that did it. And they also performed it in Wrocław as well, in Wrocław and in Warsaw. And I want to show a little bit of that. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about this before I dive into that? And I'm just going to show a couple scenes.
I'm just fascinated. I had no idea how entrenched the Jewish theater community was with Moscow Art Theater with Stanislavski.
Oh, yeah, it was very, very close. And the original actors who were in the Moscow Art Theater were also, a number of them were Jewish, and also helped to bring in Yiddish Chekhov to the United States. They brought Ibsen to the United States. This is, just the incredible experimentation that was going on in world theater, and Yiddish theater was considered to be part of world theater. So, even Alina, DePaul University's theater conservatory comes out of the Goodman Theater Conservatory. Who was the first director of you don't have to answer, the Goodman Theater Conservatory? He's a member of the Moscow Art Theater. It was David Itkin with his daughter, Bella Itkin. And they started the Goodman Conservatory Theater. And the first production they did was The Golem in Chicago. And when our dean said, we're building a whole new theater building and a new theater complex, and we're going to do the first play we've ever done at the DePaul Theater School. And I said, what is that? Isn't that The Golem? Are you doing The Golem? And John Colbert said, no, it was our town. And I said, well, that wasn't the beginning. And he said, we're not doing The Golem. So here you go. Erasure. That's what it's called. It's Erasure. So let's show a little bit of that then. And I'm going to show a scene in the Dybbuk that's not often done, and then I'll show another one that's often done. Can you give me hosting privileges here so I can do a share screen?
Speaking of, yes, I'll do that right now. Speaking of Erasure, there is an issue at the Academy Awards Museum in LA because they didn't talk about any of the founders of the studios, which are all Jewish immigrants.
Yeah, not only the founding of the studios, but also the the Jewish stories that they brought there that they didn't, evidently didn't even talk about either. That there were just so many Jewish stories, and some of them were reworked, like The Life of Emma Zola and others, but still, they were really, really important movies. Yes, so I have share screen now. Okay, good. Let's just see a little bit. I should see it. A little bit of the Dybbuk here. It's a little slow, although I have a very good print of it here. I'm streaming it from, you can get this on YouTube. And this is the version, though, from the Brandeis Yiddish Film Archives. And I'm streaming it from my server at DePaul University. So it's a very nice print, although it still is hard to read the subtitles. So do your best. Here we go. Oh, this is, wait. So this is, since you've read it, but I'll just give a little setup. Here's Chonin, who is the yeshiva boy, and he's falling in love with Leila, and they don't know why they're falling in love with each other. There's this connection. There's this bashert that they have that is so strong. He's just looking at her, and you can see in his eyes right here, there's something so powerful, and he just has to go with it. And she will respond to that as well. So that was also very daring. And then this Hasidic boy, or Orthodox, I don't know if it's Hasidic actually. Yeah, it was Hasidic. It was part of the Breslover Hasidim back then. So they get so close to each other. And then within the play itself, to have a man's soul join together, intersect with a woman's body to become embodied, male and female together on stage, was totally transgressive. And that's also, so powerful for the play, but also shows how this intersectionality is integral to the theater from the very beginning. Okay, here we go.
No? Trink. Meestens wird bei mir alles viel Wein im Keller. Druck. Ah, op geht nur der mit dem Karl. Sakar? Sagen sollen wir Jusen. Wie hast du morgen gefunden? Hast du dich da mal Schüttwitz gemacht mit der Johann Uwe? Mit der Rebelle mache ich nicht kein Schüttwitz. Als wie noch etwas am Herz nimmt er es voll auf Sachen. Also, Kunke. Da weggeworfen, eine Gemure, fast gemäßtes, sind sie mit die Kabule. Wo? Gemure ist kalt und dreckig.
So I'm sorry, the subtitles aren't always there, and now it gets caught up in the white background. But he's asking him about, so you've come here to study Kabbalah? And he says, Kabbalah is where the essence of Judaism is. And he says, Gemara, meaning the Talmud, that's dry. That's just legalistic, stuff. I want to learn something that is going to transcend this world.
Kabule reist up in den Summe von der Erde. Sie der häufte Menschen, sie die höchste Hecholes.
Sie vergesst das Frühen auch, ist der größte Sakunis. Sie können leicht auch auffallen in den Sommer rein.
Ich will nicht fallen. Ich hab mir mein Weg, das wird mich traffieren zu mein Ziel. Unsere Chachumem haben gesucht,
This, by the way, I have to give a shout out here. This is Dina Halpern, and she started the Yiddish theater in Chicago and went and stayed with the Yiddish theater all the way into the 1960s. She was caught on this side of the world during the time of the Holocaust, couldn't get back and to see her family and be with her family. And fortunately, she lived, her family died.
Weil sie haben nicht recht Schabes gehalten. Euch haben die Verhunden.
Hast du nicht kein Brüder, nicht kein Schwester?
Nein,
Ich bin euch was mit Liebe.
ich hab mein Tat nur über Schule nicht gekannt. Sind gekommen auf den Teich, besser Stuhl. Und guck, wenn ich bin geboren geworden.
Meine Mama ist heute gestorben und guckt in mein Gebäude.
Now they're telling the story. I'm going to move it ahead a little bit. The story of the pact that their fathers made with each other when they were young boys or young men in yeshiva and in Mirapol, which is where my grandmother is from. And they made a pact because these two men loved each other so much. Their love was so intense, it was almost physical. Once again, getting into a subversive homoerotic portrayal that they wanted each of their children to marry each other. And they made the pact, and then it was forgotten. It got erased. Their memory was erased from it because one of the fathers died and the other father got caught up in wanting to make money and get wealthy. So there was the, just the kind of immorality of that, or at least the just devoting oneself to the ego and to narcissism. But he says, I came here to study the highest heights, and he didn't know that she was there. Once again, it was beshert, it was fate that brought them together, or destiny. Let's just move it ahead a little bit, and they're starting to fall for each other. I think you can see that. And now, and then they go out on the doorstep, and the next day, outside of the home, in the middle of the town, he goes to a grave site that's right there in the middle of the town. Let's see what this grave site is. Here lies the grave of the holy bridegroom and bride, martyrs to the faith. They died Kiddush Hashem, for the sanctification of God's name.
Jo, a husen mit der Kalle ingekommen neus Kiddush Hashem.
Wenn der Säure Chameluk ist befallen der Städte.
The bandit Khmelnytsky came and raided the town in the 1600s. So there in the 1800s, he's still remembering Khmelnytsky from Ukraine. He was part of the Cossacks in Ukraine. There's a town in Ukraine there in his name to this day, because he's considered to be a great Ukrainian hero. This is the legacy, the heaviness of the history of those people. And when the Khmelnytsky hordes came, they killed the couple as they were led to the canopy.
Gebracht a Hus mit der Kalle, wenn man hat sie der Hütte geführt. Hat man sie du zu Tiere gebracht.
Beiden zusammen?
Es verblieben am wenig bei uns. Als bei jeder Simche tanzt man in dem heiligen Tevel, zu dem es am Meer sein, die Teute zwischen Kalle.
A feiner Minute.
Boy, nigbo, agdoischen, vahateuren, Osten, Vekalo.
And see her hand on his hand. I mean, that is really erotic and simple, but clear. And she is touching him. I love that. And here, what is it that they're joining together on? They're joining together both in their love and in their memory and in their identity as Jews. And for the ongoing survival of the Jewish people, and to remember the death of these children that were killed by the Ukrainian Cossacks. And this is so much of what Jewish theater, a Jewish performance aesthetic is about to me, for me. It's about memory, it's about identity, it's about connection to the past, but also how it influences the way we live in this world and the way we see the world. And these plays, I think, that do that the most are the ones that are embodying a Jewishness to it that, you know, is so connected. And we see this later, just that the kind of, I'm going to jump ahead now to, let's see here. I love this scene. And once again, the transgressiveness is part of social justice. It's part of wanting to do tikkun olam, to make the world a better place. Here we go. Right about here. Here they're now trying to exorcise the Dybbuk, his spirit, his neshama inside of her. And she won't have anything of it. I love this.
Ihr weiß, wie stark und mächtig ihr seid. Aber gegen mir wird ihr gut nicht machen. An mir sind verzäunt alle Wegen, verschlossen alle Stegen. Ich habe nicht wie hin zu gehen. Юг ты, милый, лук ты, милый.
Verwogten schon. Ich bin durchgedrungen mit der tiefen Rachmanis zu dir. Und ich will sich bei mir in die Häuslesen von die Malachi vorbei. Noch von dem Gut, von der Schule, musst du erhäusen.
So now they want to exile the Dybbuk from her body and create and send him back to being a wandering soul. And this is, in a sense, the predicament of the Jewish people. If we just, kind of expand out from the particulars of the play, the predicament of the spirit of Chonin wanting to join together with her in a pact, basically a covenant that was made, is the story of the Jewish people wanting to reconcile themselves to the fact that a covenant was made with God, or at least with an agreement that there would be a people that would not be destroyed. And then destruction continues to happen. And there's this sense of wandering or exile. And that's enacted in the piece. I love this one more section. Let me get to it. They're about to exorcise the Dybbuk from her. Here we go.
En nicht, wenn ich mal grün.
Ich furcht mich nicht, verreiere Klule sich herum. Nicht du, als der höchste Heuch, soll sich gleichen zu mein nitzigen Ruhe.
Soll dich zerstreiten und entläufen deine Feindsinn verdienen. Jetzt zerstreit sich ruhig. Also soll sie sich zerstreiten. Hartnäckiger, in widerständiger Ruhe. Mit dem Feuer im allmächtigen Gott. Im Namen und mit der Schuld von der heiligen Rede ihn. Zerreiß sich, Azriel ben Hodos, die letzte Fäge, was verbinden dich mit unserer lebendigen Welt und mit dem Tod und mit der Neschone von der Schule Leo Baschano. Achrim, in dem Klau Yisrael.
Ich kann sich mehr nicht lange.
Ist sie unter,
Sucht noch mir Hadisch.
Thunder.
So then he excommunicates the spirit of Chonin from the Jewish people and removes the Dybbuk or exorcises the Dybbuk from her body. And this is, kind of a commenting or criticizing of the Jewish structure as well, towards women, towards seeking spiritual heights, and towards anything that also demeans social justice because the fathers had, or that one father had become more materialistic and had forgotten the original pact of love that he had made. This very strong and erotic pact. And I just want to go to something else. Let me see if I can get there from here, and then we'll jump out. This would not Angels in America would not be created if it weren't for the Dybbuk. And here we see Tony Kushner also engaging in a kind of supernatural story that brings together the what's happening in the world, in this case, AIDS, and then the call out for some kind of way that the brokenness of the world can be healed. And that's another aspect of Jewish performance and how that performance is attempting to heal the world. So here is Pryor in Angels in America meeting the angel and going through his kind of hallucinatory, effects of the drugs, but also being visited by an ongoing angel played by Emma Thompson, the angel of history, by the way. This is not just any angel. This is Walter Benjamin's angel from the angel of history, this ongoing historical fate that continues to have detritus and the catastrophes of time building up behind it. And here, Pryor is realizing that this angel or joining together with this angel in this amazing effect that Mike Nichols does in the movie.
Greetings, prophet. The great work begins. The messenger has arrived.
Oh, God, there's a thing in the air! A thing!
I am the bird of America, the bald eagle, continental principality, lumen, phosphor, fluor, candle. I unfold my leaves, bright steel in salutation, open sharp before you. Prior Walter, long descended, well prepared.
No, I'm not prepared for anything. I have lots to do.
American prophet, tonight you become American eye that pierceth dark. American heart, all hot for truth. The true great vocalist, the knowing mind, tongue of the land.
Okay, I'm going to move it forward just a little bit.
In the kitchen.
And he's looking for the great text, the great book.
Will.
You cracked a refrigerator. You probably released...
Go a little bit into fluorocarbons.
How come I have this erection? It's very hard to concentrate.
The stiffening of your penis is of no consequence.
Well, maybe not to you, but...
Read. You are mere flesh. I am utter flesh. Density of desire, the gravity of skin. What makes the engine of creation run? Not physics, but ecstatics makes the engine run. The pulse, the pull, the throb, the ooze.
Wait, please. Excuse me for just a minute. Just a minute. Okay. All right. Oh.
Priapsis, dilation, engorgement, flow, the universe aflame with angelic ejaculate.
Oh, shit.
The heavens athrum to the seraphic rut, the fiery grapplings, the feathery joinings of the higher orders, infinite, unceasing, the blood pump of creation. Holy orifice, ecstasis in excelsis. The body is the garden of the soul.
What was that?
Plasma orgasmata.
Yeah, well, no doubt. Whoa.
I love that line. Plasma orgasmata. Well, no doubt. So I don't know if you can see the connection between the two, but I do.
What a
Or else I wouldn't be showing it to you. But, and I know that Tony did his own Dybbuk. He explored Kabbalah in creating it. What is the creation of the universe but this incredible orgasm? And that's all in Kabbalah. When Honan is talking about in the Dybbuk now, how Kabbalah, he wants to study Kabbalah. Why is it so dangerous? Why do they want to stop him from doing it? Because it's about sex. And it's about bringing the world together, the energies of the world, masculine, feminine, 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 masculine, masculine, into a tikkun, a healing, a repair of the world. And this was both transgressive then and it's transgressive now. Not transgressive in a bad sense, but it's seen that way. It's subversive. That's a better word. Subversive. I just want to say one more thing is that this brokenness that goes on in the world that Tony also puts into Angels in America, the brokenness of AIDS. And how does that get healed? The brokenness of a pandemic, the brokenness of our lives, the physicality of that. That's so much a part of, through Tikkun Olam, what is inherent in Jewish performance. Okay.
That was great, David. I know Lisa has to jump off in a moment, but I wanted to see if you have any questions, Lisa, for David.
Or thoughts.
Or thoughts, yeah.
Learn from you.
I don't have any questions at this time. I'm very intrigued I want to sort of go back and watch Angels, actually. And I also want to read Tony Kushner's The Dybbuk and just like have a little comparative exploration. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Yeah, it was interesting. We did the reading of the Dybbuk, but it wasn't Tony Kushner's version, and I think we all came away going, we think it was the translation that felt so stifling, and I'm not even sure if Tony Kushner's version can really give it justice when you adapt something from a foreign language. I feel like watching the clips from the Dybbuk that you showed us actually in its language, in its time period, feels like it's realistic, whereas when we were reading this translation it just felt so academic.
Yeah, I think Tony's version is a good one. I think he leans heavily on the aspects of gender and sexuality, less but somewhat also on the kind of socialist underpinnings as well. That's also part of it, and the narcissism of materialism and money and etc. But the idea still of healing the world, a broken world, a world that's sick, a world that is in need of repair. That's very much a part of it, and also this sense of exile, this sense that we are in exile as a people. But then also that there's exile throughout the world. It's not just any one particular people. And the Dybbuk, of course, is talking about the Jewish people. That's very Jewish centric. And at the time that Ansky wrote it, he was writing knowing that these pogroms had happened to all of the Shtetl in the Ukraine. And he didn't know a Holocaust was going to occur. He died in 1919, I think, and the play was produced in 1920.
I have a question. Do we know the audience reaction, the Jewish audience reaction of the day to the Dybbuk? Because obviously
they loved it. Okay. Loved it. So loved it.
It was opposite then to what was Sholem Asch's play?
Well, you mean when it was done in English? In Yiddish, Sholem Asch's play was well received.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Yiddish, people, some people didn't like it, or they thought it was a little, sacrilegious. But the erotic moments between the two women in God of Vengeance were not, thought to be out of place. They accepted it. And and that's what Ash was. If you read other stuff by Shalom Ash, you see the same kinds of things. You see an exploration of erotica. I've read his book Salvation and other things as well. He wrote a book about Jesus as a Jew, and the Jewish community went up in arms on that one. They said, "How dare you write about Jesus?" He said, "Well, Jesus was one of our people. Why shouldn't we write about him?"
If someone were to be writing a play about Jews today, like if any member here, a writer, and wants to explore Jewish themes, could you just distill it? It primarily has to do with memory, identity, exile, grappling with the history, as well as and how it relates to the current.
Yeah, it's like what Josh Harmon does in Bad Jews.
Yeah.
And he's doing it further in others of his plays. He's going on a journey in his work. And I saw one play about not Bad Jews. Probably most of you have seen or read Bad Jews, right? Is my guess. And that's, I think lays out a lot of this kind of, what does it mean? He's trying to expand out as well. What does it mean to be American identity? What does it mean to come from Delaware? Those Delawareans, are you going to pass down Delaware culture? What does that mean? But then he gets into, what does it mean to have Jewish culture? What does it mean to care about, this legacy that we say we care about, but are we just giving lip service to? I mean, he gets into those issues, and he did it in his other play not too long ago about being gay and always, trying to find a man. And, it's always so hard because he only likes, women. And he's always going out to women and going shopping and, and they're having fun together. And he can't find a guy that he likes. And then he keeps going home to his grandmother, and his grandmother keeps telling him, you remember your heritage, remember where you come from. And he's like, yeah, that's right. And he goes on Birthright. That was another of his plays. So he's on this journey about discovering that. And that to me is, a lot of what Jewish works are about. It's like the play, If I Forget Thee, Stephen Levinson's play. That also does that too in a more political sense, but still also takes place at DePaul. Alina is about that professor, Norman Finkelstein, who was at DePaul. And he was Jewish, and he was also, some would say, a Holocaust denier. Wasn't really a Holocaust denier, but he was, didn't follow the party line of the Jewish community and saying we have to fully, embrace this story again and again and again about the Holocaust. We have to question, why are we using it this way? He didn't deny the Holocaust. He was a child of survivors of the Holocaust, I think.
Yeah, he was. I think his mother was a survivor. I think,
but it's still part of that journey. The character, the main character, as well as others in the play, are trying to figure out their identity and how it links to their heritage, and how to create a sense of healing both for themselves and their families and the world.
Are you talking about the book from him called The Holocaust Industry?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have questions or thoughts or topic they want to explore?
Yeah, I'm curious about where the sort of story of the Dybbuk and the story of the sort of spirit intersects with the idea in Judaism of there not being an afterlife, and what, like, how that sort of, it might be a question that people know, but I'm sort of curious about.
Well, we don't not believe in an afterlife. We just don't.
But like,
there are many different versions of what that might be. I mean, some say there's a collective afterlife of a messianic age. Some say that there's an afterlife for every individual, and that you're going to get your own little, tree, and you'll sit under it and, eat dates and figs, and, and that'll be a good time. Some say it'll just be like this world. It's like Purim. We just celebrated Purim. More than any other holiday, they say in the Talmud, Purim is more important to celebrate during the times of the Messiah than any other holiday. Purim will be more important than Yom Kippurim. Purim will be the Purim that Yom Kippur wants to be. So there's multiple views of the afterlife. That's number one. And number two, the idea of the Dybbuk, that goes back into even the times of the Talmud and Kabbalah, where Kabbalah isn't in the Talmud per se, although there are quotes from it. But these are other texts that were mystical texts that were created, a lot of them by Sephardic Jews. That's where a lot of Sephardic Jews were much more into Jewish mysticism than Ashkenazic Jews. And Messianic people who call themselves messiahs, like Shabbatai Tzvi, were from Sephardic Jewry. He was Turkish. So, this idea of a being, that's what my grandmother said. She said there was someone in her town, a woman, who had a Dybbuk that inhabited her in Mirapol. And this is where the play takes place. That's where my family's from. And Dybbuks could be little, just kind of annoying things too. It wasn't just, Isaac Bashevis Singer writes a lot about Dybbuks too, like Taborlin, her demon, and others.
I have a question regarding the future of Jewish theater. How can it explore new stories and new areas of Jewish culture that haven't been touched upon, and still be considered Jewish theater? Where do you think it can go from here, in an exciting?
Well, I don't draw a line so much about what the Jewish content is as much, although I think content is important. It's like Michelle Brooks's play, Hitler's Tasters, which is a new play that it's about to become, that was in our Teatron last year, and it's about to go off Broadway. So Michelle wrote this play about 3 young women who actually did something that historically true, that were tasters of Hitler's food, so that they would die first, and then Hitler wouldn't. But eventually he does, but not from poison. But in any case, she does this incredible, like, non-linear storytelling. That's another aspect as well, that it's non-linear. And she takes this kind of commenting on commenting, which is very Talmudic.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of commenting, I think, is very Jewish. We're not the only ones. We didn't invent it. I studied Bakhtin, and Bakhtin, also the great writer and semiotics writer, also believed in a kind of diachronic way of writing, that you're writing in multiple times at the same time that you're writing about one time, and that these times can overlap and interconnect with each other. But that's what the Talmud is. That's exactly what the Talmud is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we pass down and that we can engage in. And the more that we study that way of thinking, I think we can delve more deeply into our Jewish identity. And then to do an exercise, for instance, on a story that you want to tell, and try to do it in multiple time periods, or multiple, ways that it's commenting on itself.
Anachronistic.
Exactly. Right. I think that, to me, that's very exciting. It gets into, more avant-garde theater, even, theater that's much more physical. To some extent, I gravitate a lot towards European theater, Grotowskian theater, Tadeusz Kantor's theater, theater of death. And these things are very non-linear, but still tell a story, but don't necessarily come to an end, a beginning, middle, and end. And I know that's not what American audiences like. So if we want to make money off this, it's a little tougher, but I think it's still possible. I mean, Angels in America, the things that Tony Kushner does on stage are just so epic and so different than what anybody else. Although you see it now, you see Hadestown and Rachel Chafkin, and Rachel Chafkin also has this very non-linear approach to doing things in Ars Nova and her work. And I've spoken with her about that and how she has, images from movies like Gone with the Wind and has the actors commenting on what's going on in the projection. And that's very Talmudic. And she admits that. She knows that. And Paula Vogel does that in Indecent. And it's all this commenting and, expanding out and then coming back in. It's a dance.
Yeah, I was just curious because you touched on a little bit like Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardic, and of course we have some of those themes in Judaism that you mentioned, like identity. And at the time, were there any noteworthy differences in the theater or central themes coming from Ashkenazi theater versus Sephardic, and because of culture and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sephardim, first of all, Yiddish theater as a theater doesn't really start until the late 1800s. Before that, there were Purim spiels, and the Purim spiels are more of a folk theater, and Sephardim shared that as well. In fact, Sephardim sometimes would celebrate Purim so much, this is known in around the 1200s, they got so rowdy, they actually went into the town and they had like a little pogrom against the other Persians that were there and hung someone in effigy, which was not a good scene. They didn't fare well after that. But they didn't have as much of a tradition of creating theater. The Sephardic artistic expressions wound up more in poetry, in song, in dance, in tango, and influence Spanish arts through those means, and less in having a well-made play. The well-made play comes about more as both being influenced by Christianity and by church plays and miracle plays, etc. And then the folk plays, the Purim plays, started to imitate that, and they were also influenced by German plays. So that's where you see differences. And then today, they're coming together. You see Sephardic Jews joining together with Ashkenazic Jews and creating works together. I'm trying to think of a Sephardic themed play. I know Sephardim have been in theater. What was his name? David Belasco. He was a Sephardic Jew from England, and some others also. But generally, they joined together, and Yiddish theater was just such a huge phenomenon that it kind of took over the oxygen out of the room. And we have to kind of both push back on it and yet still acknowledge its power and try to say now, what are the stories, what are the narratives of Jews that are not Sephardic, of Black Jews, of African Jews, of Chinese Jews. I was working on a play about Jews in Shanghai during the war, and I was working on it with the Chinese playwright.
Yeah, David's an incredible dramaturg as well. So if you ever have any questions, David also worked on as the dramaturg for Oslo, the play that went to Broadway. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I did it after it went to Broadway.
After? Oh, you did it after.
Yeah, it was in the Broadway series in Chicago, but I didn't.
That's why it wasn't great.
It was okay. They made some money. Yeah. So
Any other questions or
or
comments?
thoughts about, I mean, as a playwright, if you're a playwright, I don't have to tell you, you've got to write from the stories and things that that you want to write about. But it'd be good to do some of these exercises or
Yeah.
to, kind of indulge in what does it mean to step outside and write about what you're writing about, or have someone in a character that's commenting, that's more of a commenting character. I don't think it's any accident, for instance, that so many Jews are in comedy. Comedy is the commenting vehicle par excellence, right? And Jews have mastered that. I don't think it's any accident that Zelensky is a comic,
Mm.
And that he's the Schlemiel. There's a great article today by Maureen Dowd about Zelensky, this little Schlemiel. And she starts out with the Yiddish joke by Myron Cohen. I love this joke. Have you heard it? Did anyone see the article? It's in today's Sunday Times. She starts out the article just straight with the joke. And here's a joke by Myron Cohen. And she says, there's this guy who is a wood company, and he was looking for people to chop down wood. And he put out a sign. He said, "Looking for wood choppers." And this little guy, schleppy guy, comes up to him and goes, "Yeah, I'd like to apply for that job." And the the foreman of the wood chopping company says, "What can you do?" And the guy goes and picks up an axe and with one blow fells the tree. The tree falls over. I said, "That's amazing. Where did you work?" He said, "The Sahara Forest." "There's not a Sahara Forest. That's a desert." "Well, now." And that's Zelensky. He's the Schlemiel who behind that knows how to survive. And there's a wonderful book called Schlemiel is Modern Hero by Ruth Weiss. I highly recommend it. It's one of the books that I always go back to. And I think it's so important to understand what it means to do Jewish culture. And Ruth Weiss is one of the great Yiddishists of our time. I don't always like her politics. She's kind of a neo-con commentary person. But her brother is David Broskis, who also wrote one of the translations of the Dybbuk. And they, in any case, it's this way to survive that isn't, to totally try to push someone's face into the mud, but it's to say, we can work together, or I can go around you, or I can fool you, or I can, send you over here, but really we're going to get you over here. I mean, that's how Ukraine is winning this war now. Who knew that Ukraine would actually beat Russia? They're beating them. And they're doing it all through subversive performances, saying, "We're over here. Ha, I gotcha. You're just trying to get through here. We're going to set an ambush for you over here. We're going to separate you." I mean, it's good warfare, but it's using tactics that come from Jewish culture.
Well, thank you, David. This was really appreciative.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
This was great.
Yeah, awesome.
Play reading group. I'm so excited that we could have you in, and let's do another talk back soon.
Yeah, well, I'd like to hear any thoughts. If anybody wants to email me or even talk, as you can tell, I like to talk, but I'd like to hear from you all too. Please feel free, and we can set up a time to do a Zoom chat.
Yeah.
And we'd love to feature you at our Teatron Festival too. If you have a work, we do something that's more in a workshop oriented way, that would be great. So please, I know Casey's in touch with you, but feel free.
I'm just gonna pause the recording and then introduce you to everyone in case